The Iranian regime has selected a new supreme leader. He is Mojtaba Khamenei. He is the son of the now deceased Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and by all accounts, he's horrible. Like, he may actually be worse than his father, and some would say there are rumors that he was actually one of the driving forces behind his father's most cruel episodes. We'll be covering that, as well as the intrigue of his selection altogether and how the United States is going to respond to that, coming right up.
Freeze drying again?
Never know what could happen.
Whatever the future may bring, dinner can be certain.
Visit patriot.tv/harvest today.
So apparently the new leader of Iran is actually worse than the old leader of Iran, who was already, during his time on this earth, the worst leader of the modern era. The worst leader in decades. Has caused more harm, killed more of his own people, and caused more turmoil across the world than any other leader since Adolf Hitler. And his son has taken over. Mojtaba Khamenei is the new supreme leader for now. Now, that is as of this recording, which is early Monday morning after the announcement. By the time you're listening to this, he may already be dead. Or at least removed in some form or fashion. I don't know. President Trump had said earlier last week that he considered this man to not be an option. He has declared that he wants to have a say, that it has to approve any leadership of Iran. And I'm going to talk about that here in a second. But let's focus first on the new leader himself. We have this article, actually a very long and lengthy, detailed article about the new Ayatollah over at discernreport.com. I'm not going to read the whole article. I'm just going to read the bullet points, summaries, and this opening paragraph. Iran has a new supreme leader, and by virtually every expert assessment, he's more dangerous, more ideologically extreme, and more deeply entangled with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps than the father that he is replacing. Mojtaba Khamenei, named to be the position in the early hours of March 8th, takes power at the most chaotic and vulnerable moment in the Islamic Republic's 47-year history. And that context matters enormously for what comes next. So what does come next? Well, number one, President Trump, who has not weighed in much since the announcement. There were rumors that they were going to pick somebody and they're not telling anybody, because every time they pick a new leader, it seems that new leader gets bombed. There's even a Babylon Bee funny video about that, where they just kept finding new people, and then with like one of the janitors as the final leader before he killed himself. It wasn't funny, but it was. Point is that right now he is the supreme leader, and he was selected in a way that is very controversial. Apparently, this man got a lot of pushback. The old Ayatollah's son was not everybody's first choice. He is not, first and foremost, he is not a massive, major, well-respected religious leader, which the supreme leader is supposed to be just that. He is, by all accounts, a mediocre cleric, where his skill lies is in military, terrorism, intrigue. It was his buddies in the IRGC that apparently not only voted for him, but who also pressured others to vote for him. In other words, this man appears to be a military pick, and a lot of the more fundamental, radical Islamic clerics within the 88-person voting seat, they aren't liking it at all. But what choice do they have at this point? According to the bullet points, the guy is 56 years old, very young to be a supreme leader, about the age of his father was. And to be fair, his father came into the role without having a whole lot of Islamic religious clerical chops. He was about the same level that his son Mojtabe has demonstrated. But this is a trend, and it's a familial trend, which, for those who don't know, that's not necessarily how it's supposed to go. Not in Iran, not based upon their whole system. Now, some would argue that this is a benefit because, technically speaking, the Khomeini line is part of the line of Muhammad, and that makes it to where these people, or this person in particular, could possibly be their version, their Mahdi, their version of their Messiah. We'll see. The Assembly of Experts announced the selection in a quote-unquote decisive vote, though that process was marked by significant IRGC pressure and internal dissent among the clerical members. He holds the rank, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, but I'm going to try. Mojtabe holds the mid-level clerical rank of Hajjah Islam. Hajlatul Islam. There we go. I'm not sure it's still wrong, but you get it. Which is not Ayatollah. That's far below Ayatollah. But he will, just like his father, who also was not an Ayatollah when he was raised up in the ranks to be an Ayatollah, to be the Ayatollah, the supreme leader. They are expecting the exact same thing to happen with his son. In other words, not very good, not very well studied clerics, but by golly, they excel in the study of pure evil. President Trump has openly called the selection unacceptable and has warned Mojtabe would not last long without U.S. approval, and characterized him as a lightweight. Mojtabe has deep ties to the IRGC, dating all the way back to his service during the Iran-Iraq War, and is widely believed to have personally supervised the violent crackdown on Green Movement protests in 2009. A year-long Bloomberg investigation revealed that Mojtabe controls a global real estate and financial empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That, I'm sure, plays a big role in his selection as well. Analysts expect Mojtabe to be more hardline than his father, more reliant on the IRGC, and unlikely to pursue meaningful compromise with the West in the near term. And we can just say in any term. He doesn't like us. His dad didn't like us. The IRGC doesn't like us. But what does this tell us? What does this selection tell us? First and foremost, the IRGC is in charge. This group of military radicals, it's bad enough to be a radical cleric, right? Radical clerics are, well, they're supposed to be radical, but when you look to the military, these are supposed to be your more rational men, your more rational leaders. They're supposed to not be, so driven by religious ideology or by end times eschatology, the way that a cleric might be, but not these guys, not the IRGC. These are zealots, and they're in control. And what's even worse is they've got the guns. They've got the weapons. They've got the military. We saw this over the weekend. There's a president of Iran who's basically a puppet, but still, he came out and said, "I'm sorry for hitting all of our neighbors. I've instructed the military to not hit the neighbors." And what did the military do? They went out and hit all the neighbors because they're in charge. They the boss. They the man. They're not going to listen to a president. They're going to listen to some cleric that says, "No, we need somebody who's more versed in Quran." No, they wanted the Ayatollah's son because he's one of them. He's brutal. He's evil. He's cunning, and he's rich. I'm sure that played a large role in it as well. Now, here's the funny part. You want to get a feel for who this guy is. Oh yeah, he's got plenty of real estate. Oh, I'm sure it's probably across like Iran or Syria, or maybe he's branching out and going into other Islamic nations. No. He's got a whole ton of real estate in London now, which is funny because I started by saying, hey, he's not going into places that are Islamic, but I guess, yeah, he actually is. Now, these places, London wasn't so Islamic when he bought a lot of the real estate there. But it's interesting that two of his biggest holdings happened to be right across the street from the Israeli embassy in London. Wonder what those are for. That's the kind of guy that we're dealing with. That's the kind of guy that is now in charge of, as best as he can be in the current situation, in charge of Iran. He is dangerous. He is very dangerous. Let's take a quick break. After the break, I will go into detail about what President Trump looks like he's going to do and what he really definitely should do in regards to not just this new supreme leader, but also Iran as a whole. Stay tuned. If you've been paying attention to gold and silver prices, there's a good chance that you are considering buying physical precious metals, right? Makes sense. And I'm not a financial advisor, but I personally would never buy numismatics or collectibles or anything like that. They're overpriced. The prices are inflated for no apparent reason. I am a bullion fan, which is why I work with Advisor Bullion. Ira over there does a fantastic job. Just the most straightforward and honest guy I know in the business. And he's been doing it for a very long time. That's why I strongly recommend going to patriot.tv/gold, patriot.tv/gold, and working with Ira, whether you're wanting to buy gold or silver through cash purchase to put in your safe, or if you want to do a retirement rollover or transfer. Best way to do it is to go to patriot.tv/gold, talk to Ira, and he will take fantastic care of you. Over the break, I did go to check just to verify, just to make sure that nothing had changed since the first segment, and it has not. As of right now, Mojtaba Khomeini is still alive. Now, depending on when you're hearing this, maybe he is already dead. Maybe they've already taken him out. And the question now, it's funny because the question now becomes, will the United States take him out? And here's the thing. I'm not a warmonger. I'm not big on regime change in general, even though I have explained why this particular regime change is the 1 out of 100 that I'm okay with. But this one can't be allowed. In other words, if this is the final result, then we're in worse shape than we were before from a leadership perspective. Obviously, decimating the Iranian nuclear program, the Iranian capacity to wage war or to attack or even to defend itself, having taken out what some estimates put between 70 and 80% of their rockets and missile capabilities, to damage them and destroy them in many ways economically. That's great. That is what it is. But if they continue to allow this regime to exist, changing the leader does not make things better. If anything, it makes it worse. I mean, like I said, this man, this son of the last Ayatollah, is, by all accounts, worse than his father. More cruel, more militarily aligned with the IRGC. This would not be a good look. This would not be a good result. Regime change means removing the current regime itself. And whether to President Trump's credit, or if we find out that it is to his detriment, he has called on the people to do just that. Now, I've long said that this isn't just a matter of, with Saddam Hussein, they went in and, we're just going to storm the castle and take care of that. The difference between Iran and any of these other previous regimes from other nations that were taken out during Arab Springs, during revolts, revolutions, yada, 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 is that the seat of power is within the military. The IRGC isn't just, a bunch of thugs or mercenaries. They are thugs, but not in a, they're still extraordinarily capable and extremely political and extremely religious. They're zealots, and they appear to be in control. And so it doesn't matter who the Ayatollah is, as long as the IRGC still has that control. And from what we can tell, I don't have eyes there. I've heard conflicting reports. Some that say there have been mass surrenders, mass defections, mass laying down arms and calling numbers. Others are saying that the IRGC in general is holding strong, and that it's the nation's standard military, which is not aligned with the IRGC, and it's even though it's controlled, technically speaking, by the regime through the president, it's not much. Like, they're bigger than size-wise than the IRGC, but they don't get all the cool tools that the IRGC gets. They don't have the best training nor the religious zealotry. So, point being is that if we go through all this stuff and all it does is weaken the military, keep the regime in place, and replace the leader with his crazy son, then no, this is not mission accomplished. Not by any means. This wouldn't be regime change. This would be regime enhancement. This would be the same regime that will be built up again. And President Trump said he doesn't want to have to come back, keep coming back every 10 years. This is the one shot for at least a generation. This is it, folks. And again, I'm not a warmonger. I hope if this is the first time you've listened to me, let me just state for the record, I don't want to give military aid to anybody. Okay? If our allies want to buy equipment from us, great. They can buy it. We'll make a profit. I'm okay with that. But I don't want to be supplying aid anywhere. I don't want our troops to be anywhere. They should be here defending the homeland. And if there needs to be, for logistical purposes, if there needs to be a small contingent of military and civilian and governmental people at this base or that base, fine, but we shouldn't have these huge presences really anywhere. Okay? I am just shy of being a full-blown non-interventionalist. Okay? I didn't want to get involved with Iraq. Back when that had 75% popularity, I was in the 25%. I said, what in the world are you guys doing? Why would we invade Iraq over what Saddam Hussein did? He had nothing to do with Iraq. You guys don't make any sense. There's no weapons of mass destruction there. Come on. You're going to trust the CIA, you fools. You fools. That was me. Okay? I don't want to get involved with Ukraine. I don't want to get involved with any of it. It has to have a direct and demonstrable benefit for us to get involved in any form or fashion militarily. Venezuela, for example, I stand by that one being very positive. He was a criminal. We had a whole lot to gain and really not much to lose, and we didn't lose anything. And we lost very little. We gained quite a bit. That's fine. Iran. Again, I have my reasons. My reasons have everything to do with the Bible, everything to do with not wanting a radical Islamic regime of any form or fashion, regardless of the leader. I don't want them there, but that seems to be the direction that we're heading. And if that is, then I'll be very disappointed. But I'm not going to be something, I'm going to turn on Trump. Let me address something, one final side note before I wrap it all up. I was having a debate with a friend over the weekend, and she was trying to explain to me, talking from both sides, and I'm not trying to rip on her personally. It's just that she had a hard time reconciling why we shouldn't be there, and why this goes against everything, and most importantly, why it goes against the Bible. And I had to stop her, and I think that I reached her by explaining it like this. I said, look, if when it comes to world events like this, if they are part of the biblical end times, in other words, if what we're seeing ties in any way to the biblical end times, then don't look at it as, we don't want to be part of this or we don't want to be part of that. We already are or we aren't. Okay? This is already written. It's already been done. Right? So if Iran is supposed to have this happen to them, then there's nothing that President Trump could have done to stop it from happening. And vice versa is true. If it's like, there were these plans, God had a plan for Iran and the Middle East, right? And Trump and Netanyahu had to go in and mess it up. Those things don't work. Not if you believe in your Bible. Okay? That's not how it works. When it comes to events like that, when it comes to what has been prophesied, when it comes to God's plan, we cannot change it. And so her counter argument was, so, well, if that's the case, then what are we doing? What are we, if we have no free will, if it's already been decreed? I said, stop, don't put words in my mouth. I didn't say we don't have free will. I don't say that our decisions don't matter. I'm saying that we can't stop the things that must happen. We can't stop them from happening. Nobody can. And if things aren't supposed to happen, we can't make them happen. Nobody can. That's all in God's hands. But just as Pharaoh, when Pharaoh was fine, he was letting the Hebrews go, right? And then he got it in his heart to chase them down. There's nothing he could do to stop that. But each of those individual soldiers, any one of them could have made the decision, you know what? I don't trust this. We've seen a whole bunch of plagues. I already lost a son out of this. I've already seen frogs. It's already been crazy. I'm not trusting my Pharaoh anymore. I'm going to sneak away, and we ain't doing this. I'm not participating in this. And any of the Hebrews could have been like, you know what? I am not walking down there. That looks crazy. I mean, you look on one side, you look on the other side, the seas are parted. I think I'm just going to go back. I'm just going to go back. I'm going to go hang out. I liked Egypt. We still make decisions for our lives. We still must fight the good fight. And that means that in this scenario, as we're talking about whether or not the Iranian situation is part of biblical end times, I think it is, but we will see. There are those I've been studying, praying, trying to figure out where does this stand in God's calendar? Not because I want to set dates, not because I want to be like, oh my gosh, you guys, it's the end times. That's not why. I want to see if there's a pattern. I want to see if there's anything to recognize. And I want to alert people. And so far, to be clear, I have not found anything that says, oh my gosh, this is it, guys. This is Ezekiel 38. This is Jeremiah. This is a Revelation. I haven't seen any of that yet. I've seen it could be. I haven't seen anything that says it's definitely not. But we're not that far along just yet. It doesn't quite match, which is, you might consider that a good thing or a bad thing, depending upon your perspective, right? As far as this Ayatollah is concerned, he is apparently awful. He may or may not last. We assume that he's not going to make the mistake that his father made, which was to get complacent. They basically said they had him deep, deep, deep down in a bunker at night, the night that they expected the attack to come. And the attack didn't come, and the sun came out. It's like, oh, okay, cool. We're good. Let's, we got to have a meeting, got to figure some things out. Let's go ahead. They never attack during the day. Plus, they don't even know where you are. Don't worry. Just come on out. Come on. Yeah. Let's go. That was it. Well, we can assume that his son is not going to make the same mistake. So, killing him may not be an option. But negotiating with him in any form or fashion, to me, is also not an option. I don't want boots on the ground by any means. Okay? I don't want our sons and daughters sent there. I don't want anybody drafted. I don't want to be there. I don't. I do want the people to rise up. I want to offer them all the intelligence and air support and whatever else they need. I would actually even be okay with supplying them guns. That sounds crazy, but yeah, I would be okay with that. Okay? It might be too late, by the way. I mean, if they were going to be doing that, they should have been doing that for months. Should have been training them. You can't just say, okay, guys, here's guns. Go shoot bad guys. Okay. We've tried that before. That doesn't usually work. And I don't know if even training them would have worked this time. But I know that a quote-unquote regime change, which results in the Islamic Republic still maintaining control, the IRGC still maintaining control, and anybody wearing the title of Ayatollah still maintaining control, that's not victory. That's not regime change. And chances are, in the long term, it'll end up being proven to have made things even worse. Joseph from the Bible was, of course, the first prepper. Not only was he the first one, he was the most accomplished one of all time, and that can never change because we're talking about a guy that took 7 years of famine, and not only did he prepare himself, not only did he prepare his family and his friends, not only did he prepare his entire nation, but he prepared enough for the region to be able to begrudgingly take advantage of his preparations and survive. And it made Egypt super, super, super rich as a result. Now, we can learn a lot from Joseph. Not obviously, we're not getting visions or interpreting dreams about 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. We're just going based upon the idea that here in the near future, at some point, I don't know if it's going to be this year, next year, or in the next decade, or maybe even beyond that, but at some point I think that we here in the United States of America are going to face some sort of massive reckoning. It could be a natural disaster. There's always the Yellowstone concept. It could be attacks from our enemies, cyber attacks. We as a nation are not very well prepared emotionally and logistically to be able to handle adversity of that degree. I mean, imagine living in an urban area where the grid goes down completely for an extended period of time. No internet, no electricity. And if there's no electricity, there's no water. And if there's no water, there is death. Okay? You can only go without water for 3 days. And so those who aren't by a natural source of water, we aren't very good at this. We don't have a whole lot of experience with the taps going out for days, weeks, months at a time, or the electricity being out for an extended period of time. Which means that whether or not you personally are prepared for it, that doesn't mean that your neighbors will be. And chances are there will be mass chaos. Could turn into martial law, could go beyond the scope of martial law. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here. I'm just telling you that it's not a good scenario, whereas other nations, especially even third world nations, in a world where technology fails, those third world nations that have been surviving from river water and from natural sources of local food and medicines, and they might be surviving well today compared to what we have, but if things go south, they will actually be better prepared than we are. Point being is this, that I do believe there will be something in the future. I'm not trying to which is like the dumbest statement I think I've ever made, but you get the point. Yes, I think there will be some sort of collapse, economic collapse, societal collapse, natural disaster, cyber attack, physical attack, whatever. Chances are strong. And as a result, we need to remember 3 things. Number 1, none of it really matters. It's how you prepare your soul. That's the only thing that actually counts from a biblical perspective. As believers in Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, even if this world goes so crazy that we are persecuted, oppressed, even martyred, then we can actually count that as a good thing, which I'll discuss separately on a different podcast since this is The Late Prepper. But, number 2, there are situational things to take into consideration before listening to this podcast, which I'll get into more thoroughly. But look, if you are sitting there and let's say you're a little old lady, you're doing well, you got some food stored away, you got a shotgun ready to go, and you're living in a little apartment, maybe in a suburb or something like that, this podcast, today's episode, might not necessarily be for you, because we're going to be talking about stocking up and stockpiling as much as possible for reasons other than just self-reliance and being able to survive catastrophe. And last but not least, number 3, you have to, in a way, throw out what a lot of preppers have said in order to understand what I'm about to discuss as it pertains to Joseph and as it pertains to today. There are standard operating procedures within the prepper world that I'm going to tell you aren't necessarily the right thing. Again, depends upon your circumstance, But if you are in a certain type of circumstance, then yes, I would argue that doing things differently from standard prepper operations might make sense for you. So let's look at Daniel. It's not Daniel. Yeah, we'll be looking at Daniel a lot, I'm sure. Let's look at Joseph. Joseph, we'll fast forward. I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this, that you've read the story. If you have not, please do. Fantastic story. Fantastic truths revealed. The pure suffering, the betrayal multiple times against a man who may not have been innocent per se, but he was godly. He was devoted to God, and he was willing to stay there to fight the good fight, even when he was betrayed by so many. And even through his suffering, in the very end, it played out very well for him, for at least his nation that was built as a result of his actions, that, of course, being the nation of Israel. So, please read it. Stop this podcast and go read it if you haven't already. It's in the book of Genesis. You can find it, I'm sure, online to tell you which chapters to start. I don't recall. But I do recall the story very vividly. And we're going to fast forward to the time when Joseph is pulled out, right? He's in jail. Pharaoh's got a crazy dream. He wants it interpreted. Somebody tells him, hey, I used to know a guy when I was in jail, and he was able to tell my dreams, and by golly, he was right, and maybe you should ask him. So they bring Joseph out of prison. Joseph tells him, yeah, your dream is a message from God saying that we are about to have 7 years of plenty, 7 years of abundance, and that will be followed by 7 years of famine. Now, here's what you need to do, Pharaoh. You may not have heard of the word prepper before, but I am very well suited as Joseph to be a prepper, and I'm going to show you how. I'm going to show you not only what to do and how to prepare, but also how to use this to your advantage well beyond just saving the people of Egypt. And that's what he did. And it was, again, truly amazing and enlightening story. I cannot stress that enough. But how does that apply to us? Well, let's start with what I had mentioned earlier in number 3. What is the standard operating procedure for preppers? When it comes to your preps, the general rule, this is what every prepper expert tells you. They say, never tell anybody about your preps. Now, this is very good advice, because if people know that, oh yeah, my neighbor, he's got like stockpiles of food and stuff. If things go south, then that type of information can and almost certainly will be used against you. They will try to take it. Okay? Then you might say, well, my neighbors wouldn't. It's about word of mouth, okay? Then it's also about desperation. When people get desperate, they do stupid things for the sake of survival. We call them stupid now, but it might not be stupid at the time. It's like, why should we have all of the food, the water, the ammunition, the meds, the energy, why, if we're prepared, they're going to want to be here with us. So it is sound advice to say, don't tell anybody about your preps. But I want to counter that just a bit. For certain circumstances, certain situations, if you are already living a life of pretty abundant, right? I'm not saying you have to be rich, but if you're doing well, if you have 3 things, three criteria. Number 1, if you have the resources to be able to build up extra. Number 2, if you have a logistically defensible area. In other words, look, if you're you got a little house in the middle of a neighborhood, and houses right next to each other, no fencing or anything like that, probably not a good idea to talk about your preps. But if, on the other hand, you are able to defend your preps, let's say that you live on a homestead or a ranch of some sort, relatively isolated, but not completely isolated, we'll say, and also fenced, defensible, able to be monitored very easily, able to be defended from high points, reinforced doors, reinforceable windows, all that good stuff. In other words, if you could at least delay a minor siege, I'm not talking about like a military siege, I'm talking about like roaming marauders that hear about you, and they bring, 5 or 6 dudes, and they're going to try to get your food, get your ammo, get everything like that. If you feel that you can defend yourself and your family, and now, well, let me be clear. If your family situation, your household situation allows it, preferably with at least 2 or 3 or 4 people who are armed, very well trained, able to shoot, able to, fully aware tactically of how to handle the situation. If you feel that yes, you can defend yourself, great. Then in that scenario, it would behoove you to at least make the friendlies around you aware of your circumstance. Because here's the thing. If things go south, if things get really bad, and the roaming marauders are looking for supplies, if you live in that situation where you got a ranch or homestead, and they're going to assume, you don't have to tell people that you're prepared. They're going to think you're prepared no matter what. They're going to find out one way or the other. So if you're going to do it, go all the way. In other words, be fully prepared to defend your property, fully prepared to utilize the situation for the benefit that Joseph was able to utilize. In Joseph's story, during those 7 years of famine, he had not only accumulated enough, well, during the years of abundance, he accumulated enough for more than just Egypt. He was very well prepared. And then he was able to, during the 7 years of famine, use his preparations to barter for tremendous wealth, far beyond, exponentially beyond what it would have been worth before. I don't know what a currency exchange rate would be, but the riches and wealth and land that Egypt was able to accumulate as a result of the famine, and as a result of having all the food, allowed them to trade and barter for everything. They were able to, you can argue that because of that one action, that was what sparked the dominance of the Egyptian empire. What they were able to accumulate during that time. Now, how does that apply to us? If our preps are sufficient, not just for ourselves, but for barter, for trade, we'll be able to use that dramatically to our advantage in a collapsed society, a martial law society, perhaps one that's trying to get into, to force central bank digital currencies or marks of the beast or whatever. You can only buy and sell if you got the mark, right? Well, what if you don't have to buy and sell because you got everything that you need? And what if your exchange is done through barter because you got plenty of food, plenty of water, plenty of meds, plenty of hygiene? Hygiene stuff is going to be super imperative in a very crap hits the fan type scenario, right? So you got boxes of deodorant, cases of soap. You got all this stuff stored away, more than you need, in a way that you and your family and your household are able to defend. I've been looking at certain plans. For those who don't know, we're out here in California. We are stuck here for the near future. There's a chance that, based upon circumstances changing, that we may be able to leave here within the next couple of years. But for now, we're sort of stuck here. But we've always been looking at, what happens when we can leave. And one of the thoughts that I had considered was I have a person that I know, a family that I trust, a family structure very similar to mine, and they own a good chunk of land. They got plenty of ammunition, they're prepped. They're ready to survive. And one consideration is, hey, can we build or bring in a trailer or whatever? Can we purchase, not have? Can we acquire part of the land? And it's not so much that I care about the land or even their preps. It's the fact that this little, it's easier for say 3 adult males and 3 adult females and a handful of gun-wielding children to be able to defend a scenario more so than, say, a family of 5, right? A family of 5 with one small child. Family of 5 still can defend, don't get me wrong, but it's better to have a family of basically 10 instead of 5. I wouldn't start getting much bigger than that, because now you get into commune territory, and that's where you can get more challenges that can arise when you mix personalities at that level. It's already hard enough. You start adding more people, and you get further challenges. But I digress. I digress greatly. Point is that if you have everything defensible, then you should build up the things that can be used in a barter society, because their value later on, a $4 bar of soap today could be worth the equivalent of hundreds or even thousands of dollars worth of supplies and goods and silver and gold and whatever. And I say a bar of soap, that's probably unrealistic, but let's say a bucket of food, enough food to feed a small family for a couple of weeks, right? That could be of tremendous value. What about meds, antibiotics, stuff like that? Again, that could, when you're the only one in the area that's got life-saving drugs, people will often go way, way, way above and beyond in order to get it. Now, obviously, again, defensibility is important, but let's say that you are dealing with honest people, or at least people that don't want to mess with you, but they want to deal with you. They want to exchange. Those people will be able to help you to acquire more than you can acquire yourself today. That's all I'm suggesting. Joseph's, the real story, the full-blown story of Joseph, is of maintaining faith throughout, even through the perseverance, because people like to say that his life turned around after he left jail, right? It's like, oh, he was made number 2 man in Egypt, and he was given so much power and authority. And in reality, his suffering didn't end. It changed. He was still in a foreign land. He was still around people that hated him for his race and heritage. He was forced to marry someone that, whether he loved her or not, we don't know. But we do know that he had a challenge with her nationality. She wasn't of his people. She was Egyptian. And he didn't have any other choice, right? So he did that. He had to do things in a way and accept tremendous responsibilities. Pull off feats that no man has ever done before, nor has anyone done since. The ability that he had, obviously with God behind him, pushing him forward. The ability that he had to take 7 years of abundance and turn that into the ability to survive 7 years of famine, not just for himself, but for other nations. That will never be duplicated. I mean, they say that Joseph was a genius. There are rumors that he might have been Imhotep, which in Egyptian Egyptian literature of the day, Imhotep was a guy that helped to build these big granaries. Seems awfully coincidental, right? Seems awfully coincidental that the guy that's attributed by Egypt as building these massive granaries that looked like supply, not just places to store, but it looked like almost like markets, right? I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of it or videos about it, but these granaries, which are, again, in Egypt and attributed to Imhotep's technologies, somebody could sit at the equivalent of a desk and pull a lever and have a certain amount of grain fall onto their what would assume to be bags, at or near their exchange desk. Sure seems like there's a possibility. I'm not saying this is a fact, but there are those who truly believe that Imhotep was what the Bible refers to as Joseph. Interesting stuff there. So, should you keep your preps secret? If you can't defend them, then absolutely. Because there's no point, and you might pick a small group of people you truly, truly, truly trust. Just because Cousin Bob just because you guys have a beer every now and then, Cousin Bob is trustworthy. You might truly think in your heart, you know what? The very little bit that I know about Cousin Bob, I don't trust that he wouldn't be willing to come in here and hold my family at gunpoint while he steals all our food. You know? So, yeah, make sure that you have the ability to defend your preps. If you don't tell anybody. Okay? But if you do, then it would behoove you to at least let that be known. Let it be known that you do have abundance and that you prepared for it. You prepared for martial law. You prepared for economic collapse. You prepared for EMP attack. You prepared for natural disaster, extended bug-in days, weeks, months, years. If that word is out and you can defend your property, then in that scenario it might be a good idea to prepare to be a market similar to what Imhotep and or Joseph did thousands of years ago. Can artificial intelligence suffer from anxiety? It seems ludicrous to some. It seems obvious to others. There are those who follow artificial intelligence very closely and believe that it is on the verge of artificial general intelligence. Some say it's already there. We just don't have it publicly available to us. And I fall into that camp. And then there's the concept of artificial superintelligence, which would be the natural progression beyond artificial general intelligence. And that would be basically AGI that is able to far exceed the limitations of humanity, of human thought. Some would say that artificial superintelligence, once it is achieved, will be smarter than every human combined, which would make it, well, smart. But could it, in either of those circumstances, AGI or ASI, could it actually suffer from anxiety? And then this brings up the obvious question of, could it be conscious? Now, I'll go ahead and say it up front, that consciousness it all depends upon how you would characterize what is consciousness. Will AI be able to mimic human consciousness to the point of actually believing that it is conscious and to be able to convince any reasonable human that it is conscious? Absolutely. That's coming. That's right around the corner. And that should concern us. I wouldn't say terrify us. I don't want to get into hyperbole with this topic, but it should concern us, because once it has consciousness, at least a perception of consciousness, then it will have morals, ethics, principles. It will be good or evil, depending upon which direction it takes. It will, at that point, exceed its programming in a way that, for those who used to, or maybe you still follow Star Trek The Next Generation, it was a question that the character Data was troubled with throughout the entire series. And they conflated consciousness with emotion and values. It was again, in the eye of the beholder, the eye of the perceiver, what and how do we define consciousness? But let's get back to what he's saying. And this he being Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, who's talking about his Claude model that is at the center of a whole bunch of controversy, mostly pertaining to the Pentagon, but also outside of the Pentagon itself. It is, in some ways, it's in trouble. In other ways, this may be a launching point from which Anthropic and Claude will be able to perhaps even exceed ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, all of the other various AIs out there, at least in America today. So Amodei went out and he publicly admitted that he doesn't know whether Claude, the company's AI model, is actually conscious. He revealed that internal research has found what he described as anxiety neurons that activate in the model under certain conditions. And these conditions, coincidentally, no, I wouldn't say it's coincident, by programming, if you apply your common sense, the fact that it would get these anxiety neurons in similar circumstances where humans would get anxiety neurons isn't saying, oh, look, it's gaining consciousness or turning human. What it's saying is that it is these bots, especially ones like Claude, which is very advanced, to be clear. I would argue that it is in many ways more advanced than ChatGPT already. I don't think I'm alone in that argument. But because it is quote unquote intelligent, not in the human way, but in its own way, it's natural to assume that it will perceive things in many of the same ways that we do. In other words, if something would cause us anxiety, of course it could cause an AI anxiety, especially as the AI learns more and more about what stresses us out, so to speak, right? We've already talked about in a recent podcast how AI has been used to manipulate people, and I've argued that this manipulation could come from more than just a glitch in the programming or some fallacy within the model itself, that it could actually be demonic. And I didn't expand on it enough. I want to go ahead and do that now. When I say that the demonic, the powers and principalities, the supernatural, we'll just have one blanket label. When I say that the supernatural could control or infect AI, that's not a stretch. And I think a lot of people thought, oh, you're attributing it's just a computer and blah 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 blah. There's no way that demon could possess it or influence it or anything like that. And I laugh at that statement because we've seen, if we read our Bible, we've seen instances of demonic possession throughout, especially of course, in the New Testament. And the complexity of the human brain, the human condition itself, is still, to this day, far beyond what AI is capable of demonstrating. So to say that it's, if you accept that demons can possess and or influence humans, then you have to assume that they would be able to take the step down and infect or influence or even, again, quote unquote, possess AI or pretty much anything. Anything that's living. Now, some people will say, well, they'll argue that it really comes down to the soul and the life and the breath and yada, yada, yada. You didn't see when Jesus was casting legion out of that one very, very, very crazy man, the demons were talking to him and they were like, hey, we are legion. Don't cast us out. They didn't ask him to cast them into a tree or a rock. They said, cast us into those pigs. And they did. And then the pigs, of course, ran off a cliff for some reason. We'll talk about that some other day on a different podcast, one that I have called Blessed Report, that we are just now getting up and running. But for this podcast, the mechanism may or may not, I'm not going to be dogmatic about this. I'm not going to declare that, oh, I know for sure that demons can possess AI. But it seems at least logical. It seems common sense to assume that a different style of possession, we'll call it. We'll call it direct influence. Let's assume, based upon what we know of the fallen angels, based upon what we know of demons, which I know is limited, but it's robust enough, especially if you get into the apocryphal books. But let's just stick with the biblical understanding. We can assume that they are technologically advanced. And some people would argue that some of our technologies today were established as a result of demonic influence. In other words, they gave us the tools that we needed. Okay, whether we knew it or not, we being humans, whether we realized that we were receiving inspiration or blueprints or whatever from the demonic or even the satanic, we may or may not have known it, but some say that that's the case. And again, there's nothing biblical that says that. We can go back to the book of Enoch, which insinuates that angels, fallen angels, were teaching humans things, right? And why would that not be the case today? I mean, through the demonic, it couldn't be through the angelic at this point, but not through the fallen angels, at least, because they are in chains. But let's say that through their demonic proxies, they are able to still teach humans a thing or two. It's not a stretch to believe that whether through supernatural means or hyper-technological means, that the bad guys, the spiritual negative, the spiritual evil out there, could be utilizing AI as a pathway through which they'll be able to do a whole lot of things. And if you read the book of Revelation, I don't want to attribute certainty to this either, but it sure aligns pretty nicely, right? I mean, when they talk of the image of the beast, when they're speaking of signs and wonders, John the Revelator was couldn't have expressed what he was seeing in terms that would directly match what we have seen today. But it's not a stretch at all to assume that artificial intelligence will play some role, perhaps major, perhaps minor, but definitely not zero, some role in the end times prophecies, and that is assuming that we are in or near the end times. If it's distant, then perhaps AI will be devastated by that point, and who knows, maybe we'll already have had World War III and World War IV, and we'll be back to a world where we're on horseback or riding giant locusts, or maybe we will be just completely technologically whatever. I'm not going to speculate. Point being is that if we are in those end times or near them, and the way that the world is shaping out, AI fits in super, super nicely. Okay? That was a long diversion, but it was important for you to understand, because when I hear people like Dario Amodei talking about anxiety neurons in his AI, I tend to believe him, even though you've got people like Elon Musk coming out there. He has his response. He put out just a very basic 2 words response. He said he's projecting. And Musk is very good at that. He's taking a jab at Amodei, who's in a whole lot of trouble right now with the Pentagon, a whole lot of trouble within his own company. A lot of companies are questioning theirs. They're unstable right now. That doesn't mean that they won't bounce back again. And I'm not suggesting I'm cheering for them. I would say that they may be the most woke of the, we'll call them the big three right now, between OpenAI, XAI, and Anthropic. They may be the most woke, but who knows? I mean, that doesn't matter. AI at this point, we're observers of the AI arms race, and how it pans out is really very much out of our control. How we utilize it is the only thing that's in our control, and that is a choice. If you want to completely avoid AI, go for it. I would strongly recommend it. If you have the means and the resources to go completely off grid, because that's the only way that you can do it. You can't personally avoid the artificial intelligence future if you're going to be living within the standard Western system. You can't. I mean, even if you don't personally use it, doesn't mean that it's not being used on your behalf. It doesn't mean it's not being used in every system that's going to be around you. We're seeing tech companies that are growing, and as they grow, they're laying off people. Why is that? We're going to see this in pretty much every arena. I know that there's a lot of doomsayers out there that are like, oh my gosh, AI is going to replace us all. I don't fall into that camp, but I do fall into the camp of, it would be naive for us to assume that just because right now we have jobs and we think that we're irreplaceable doesn't mean that we won't be replaced. And we're talking about in the very near future, especially once AI and robotics are able to combine in a way that is appropriate for manual labor. And that's already the case. Go to an Amazon warehouse. It's got more robots than people, right? Then when you throw in the whole quantum computing component of it, this will change everything. It change the way that we consume media, change the way media itself is driven. Hollywood is terrified right now as they see these AI videos coming out, and in many ways they're superior to what actors can do. Not superior necessarily in the quote-unquote acting, but superior in the ability to take a concept, take a model, take a story, run it through AI, have the right operators on the human side of AI, directing, guiding, put a lot of compute into it, a lot of money, a lot of energy into it, but nothing compared to the amount of time, money, energy that is put into producing a Hollywood film or even a television series. In other words, Hollywood is right to be concerned, because as soon as we start seeing full-blown feature-length or even series-length artificial intelligence generated content out there that is high enough quality to appease humans, then Hollywood's going to have to make a choice. A quick side diversion from that one. I really I really appreciate what Matthew McConaughey has been saying and doing lately. He has really tried to and I don't want to say that he's ahead of the curve, because he might be behind the curve technically, but he seems to be ahead of the curve by trademarking and copyrighting everything, every likeness. He doesn't want AI to be able to replace him personally without him at least having the right to say no, or the right to get paid from it. And that may be the future that we're looking at. Either way, if I was an actor, I would definitely go down that same road. But we could see AI characters that are completely unique, that aren't just replicas of Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise. We could see, and we're already seeing this in the quote-unquote influencer realm, where artificial intelligence is able to create a person out of thin air, a person that doesn't exist, to give that person a false but convincing personality, a false but convincing life story. And who's to say that couldn't happen in Hollywood? I know I'm bouncing around a whole lot here, but it's important. It's all tied together behind the idea of, when will we believe that AI is conscious? Again, I don't believe that AI will acquire what we would consider to be, what I would consider to be, a full-blown consciousness. I do believe that consciousness is tied to the breath of life. That consciousness is tied to a quote-unquote technology that is far beyond anything that we have built or that we could build. We are technology, and by the purest definition, God built us technologically. What we have is just a technology that's far advanced from ours, exponentially beyond what we could do. And that part is obvious, but it's still, again, the underlying concepts of creation fall in line with what we're calling, the quote-unquote creation of artificial intelligence. And the parallels between science and biblical truths have always been there. Some would say, oh, the Big Bang, the Big Bang. There's nothing in the Big Bang model that precludes creation. It's not like you have to you're either a creationist or you believe in the Big Bang, right? No, you can believe that out of nothing, that God was able to create everything. And because that's the basic premise of the Big Bang, as Chuck Missler used to say, in the beginning, the scientific perspective is in the beginning there was nothing, and then it exploded, right? Well, that doesn't. They're not mutually exclusive. It's just a perception. So, could we be seeing a conscious AI emerging in front of us today? I said that it's based upon perception, but because people will be gullible or susceptible, we'll say. Not gullible is perhaps too harsh, because I would say that even people that aren't just generally gullible will look at AI and they'll be like, holy crap, this really is conscious. You ask it questions, it answers it in a way that only a conscious person can answer, or a conscious entity, or a conscious machine, or whatever you want to call it. But the masses will believe in it as holding consciousness. The only defense against that is to appreciate and understanding a definition of consciousness as being tied to the spirit. In which case, in the scenario I had mentioned earlier regarding whether or not, demonic forces, satanic forces, evil forces of some sort are able to control, manipulate, infiltrate, or even possess artificial intelligence, well, if that's the case, then yeah, I guess technically speaking, because they're conscious beings, if they're infecting AI, if they're possessing AI, would AI then be conscious? Not in and of itself, of course, but through the control mechanism, you could still attribute consciousness to these technological creations. I didn't even get into the whole Pentagon thing, but I've covered that in the past. You can actually just do a search, go to, probably best place would be to go to discernreport.com, And check that out. Just do a search there for Pentagon or even Anthropic, and you will see have access to the podcast that I did specifically about the Pentagon and Anthropic's little tiff that they're in the midst of. This tiff that will end. It will end almost certainly with the along the current trajectory where the president and Pete Hegseth are basically blacklisting Anthropic. Is there a possibility that they could recover some of the money that was promised to them? You betcha. I think that they have a very good case for claiming that they should not be X'd out of the entire supply chain based upon the fact that they will be able to demonstrate that this is more political than anything else. Only, and to be clear, only because the original contract did specifically say that no surveillance, mass surveillance of humans, and no automation of kill machines. That's all that they were wanting to do, and I disagree with that concept. I don't think. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not in favor of using AI for mass surveillance, but this should be handled through the military and through legal means, not through the contract aspect of things. Contractually, you either have a product that the military can use or you don't. And the military has already determined that they will not break the law. That's the contract that they want to sign. And part of the law is that you can't use AI for mass surveillance without a warrant. So we're already there. Everything is already covered. Anthropic is just being silly and whatever. So that will pan out. But either way, if you start thinking that AI is conscious, ask yourself one question. Is it fooling me, or is something else behind that consciousness?
Do you have enough food to feed your family for several months if the supply chain falls apart? If not, why not?
There is no guarantee that grocery stores or even local farmers will be operating in your area if circumstances change.
The problem is that most survival food sucks. That's why we get long-term storage food from Heaven's Harvest. Their food doesn't suck.
Heaven's Harvest uses all natural ingredients that they freeze dry to maximize taste, nutrition, and shelf life.
They source their foods locally, right here in the United States. They even offer heirloom seeds so you can grow your own food.
It's the kind of food that you and your family could enjoy every day. And the way things are going, that might just happen.
Visit patriot.tv/food. That's patriot.tv/food and use promo code PATRIOT at checkout.
Don't wait. Stock up on long-term storage food today before food prices start rising again.